So thank you guys all for being here today. As Becca said, we really appreciate it. We kind of wanted to get this group together because when the districts kind of get shifted, that'll happen officially, I believe, in November. Am I saying that correct? So this is one last opportunity to get this group together before some folks go on to new adventures. So that's kind of what we're doing here and what we wanted to hear from you guys. So some of you guys have seen these questions, I think, but we're going to launch into some of these questions that have been submitted by the COPA and by the group here today. So let's get started. Well, I'm going to start with you, Leader Johnson. Tennessee is on track for a multi-billion-dollar budget surplus, but that extra cash is going to be unspent until lawmakers come back in 2023. In fact, I think we're looking at maybe a $3.4 billion surplus, but I know that number kind of fluctuates. So what will be the priorities for allocating that money in 2023?
Great. Okay, I'm on here. Well, thank you, first of all, for having us here today. It's great to be here with my colleagues from the General Assembly. I would like to touch just briefly on the redistricting aspect of things, because we did have to go through that every 10-year redistricting process. And so there will be some changes. We'll be welcoming Todd Warner to the Williamson delegation. We'll be welcoming Senator Joey Hensley to the Williamson delegation to join Sam and myself. And so really Spring Hill is in a pretty amazing spot, because effectively now you've got Joey Hensley and representing the Williamson County part of Spring Hill, but I still represent Williamson County, so we'll be working closely together on issues that are important to you, and adding some folks on the House side as well. So I think it's going to be a very positive, not only for Williamson and Murray County, but for Spring Hill. Spring Hill just happens to be right kind of the epicenter of where a lot of this redistricting took place. You're right. I'm proud to say that because of the work my colleagues and I have done in recent years, I can safely say Tennessee is in the best fiscal condition it's ever been in the history of the state. And that's due to a number of reasons. We are very conservative with your tax dollars. The way our budget process works, we base a budget on projected revenues, meaning we have a funding board that's made up of our constitutional officers and economists and the governor, and they do an analysis of the economy, and they make projections into the future in terms of growth in the economy, growth in tax revenue, or declines if you're in that kind of an environment. And so what we do is we base a budget on a very conservative estimation of that projection. And that's what you want us to do. We're not ever going to nail it to the penny, because we can't tell you exactly how many tax dollars we're going to collect in the next fiscal year. So we are very conservative with that. So if we're doing our jobs, we're going to come back every year and have a surplus, because that means we underestimated the revenue collections, and we based our budget on that. What we've seen in the wake of COVID, as many of you know, and some of this is because of the excessive spending that's taking place at the federal level, which is leading to inflationary policies, is we've had a very strong economy, and we get roughly 2/3 of our revenue from sales taxes. And so when the economy is good, we do very well. But we have to recognize that when the economy starts to slow and become recessionary, we get hit harder. I'm very proud that we don't have a state income tax, we don't have a statewide property tax, but our revenues are subject to greater degrees of fluctuation. So in the good times, you want to see those really large surpluses. And then hopefully in the bad times, the surpluses will be smaller. So you said, what will be the priorities for that? And I know my colleagues will want to chime in on this as well. We have a rainy day fund. That's our state savings account. It's at the highest number it's ever been in. $1.85 billion now is in our state savings account. We want to keep growing that. We want to keep putting money in there. And the other thing that's important about our budget process is that in the last 4 fiscal years, we've taken on no new debt. Zero debt. And we are, as a result, the least indebted state in the United States of America. You owe less per capita than any other state in the nation. So what we've been doing, because we've had these surpluses, is we recognize that as one-time money. And as you know, in any ledger, you have one-time money, you have recurring money. We recognize those surpluses in the following fiscal year as a one-time allocation. We can use that money for capital expenditures. So a good example would be if we're going to build a new science building on the Middle Tennessee State University campus, and it's going to cost $60 or $70 million. In years past, we would have bonded that. We would have issued bonds and amortized that over a 20-year period of time. We haven't been doing that. We've been writing a check and just paying cash for those larger capital expenses. That's a good way for us to use that one-time money in a way that will protect us in the future. It's just like your family budget. You don't take on new debt, you pay cash for things, and then you don't have a payment moving forward, and so that even strengthens your position moving forward. So, to summarize, we'll continue to do that, take on no new debt, pay cash for large capital expenditures, build up our rainy day fund, and prepare for potentially, I don't mean to get overly political, but I believe in Washington they're doing everything they can to destroy this economy. And we're trying to fight that, and at some point we've got to be prepared for a recession and for those downturns.
Is there anybody else who wanted to chime in on that? We can pass the mic. Okay, you covered it. Okay, this one's also for you, Leader Johnson. How about any other priority items from the governor's agenda that you can give us a preview for? I know it's a little early, but for the legislative session.
Yeah, so we'll start to hear from the governor about legislative priorities. The governor's office will start their budget hearings here very soon. That's where he brings in every agency, every department. They come in and talk about their budget, what they're spending money on, where they can cut, where they may need additional revenues. That's a very lengthy process, as you might imagine, and it takes place over several weeks. I suspect, and again, haven't had a concrete conversation with the governor. As you know, he's been very focused on education, both the K-12 level as well as higher education. And we've done some really, really exciting things in terms of making community college more accessible, access to our Centers for Applied Technology. We've got a strong economy. You just look around, you see that here in Spring Hill, you see it across Middle Tennessee. Companies want to come to Tennessee, but one of the concerns they have is where are we going to get that qualified workforce? And Chairman Cepicky has been very, very involved in this on the education front, and he could speak in greater detail. But the governor really recognizes, as do we, that we've got to get more of our kids. Doesn't mean every kid needs to go to a four-year university, they don't, but we need more kids going to trade school, learning to be pipe fitters and welders. We need more kids going to community colleges, and certainly some will go on to four-year universities as well. So strengthening K-12 education and making sure that we have good access to higher education for those who want to pursue that.
And what are the next steps with the TISA funding kind of plan?
Sure, and many of you probably followed this past legislative session. We took on a very complex issue, which is our education formula, funding formula, which has been referred to as the BEP plan or Basic Education Plan. And it's basically how the state determines how we're going to allocate state tax dollars down to local school districts, the K-12 school districts. And it's a very complex formula, a lot of moving pieces and parts. Governor Lee, this past session, said, you know, the formula is outdated, it's antiquated, we need to revise it. We need to be allocating money to educate a child, not to educate bureaucracies and processes. And so we passed and adopted a new formula, which will soon go into effect, that's going to allocate those dollars to every kid. We could go into details about how the formula works, but it's a much cleaner, easier formula for people to understand, whether you're a county commissioner, county mayor, school board member, member of the General Assembly, or just a parent that wants to understand how that funding takes place. In conjunction with passing a new formula, we agreed to put an additional $1 billion into K-12 funding. That's the largest increase in the history of the state, even adjusted for inflation. Now, we would all tell you we don't believe in throwing good money after bad, but we also have pending litigation before the Supreme Court relative to school funding. It was important that we do that, and we had the money to do it. We didn't raise your taxes, we didn't take on any new debt in order to be able to make that cash injection into K-12 funding. So implementation of that program and ironing out the details when you take on something of that magnitude that literally affects every school in the state, every kid who's in a K-12 education, every single one of those people are affected. So there are a lot of stakeholders. So we're all going to be watching very closely to see how that gets implemented and what changes need to be made going forward. But I think it was a very positive move. And I would love for someone else to take a question now. So.
I'm going to open this up to everybody. So this is for anybody, and I'll pass my mic, or we can pass that microphone to anybody who wants to answer this one. What steps will be taken after the decision of Metro Nashville to refuse the Republican National Convention and therefore robbing Nashville business owners of an opportunity for tourist funds? I'm sorry. You'd have kept the mic, wouldn't you?
Well,
Senator Hensley.
First of all, I'd just like to thank the people here for allowing me to represent you in the state Senate. It's a great honor and a privilege to do that. And I'm going to pick up more of Spring Hill, like Jack mentioned. I've had Spring Hill in Murray County, and now we have the Williamson County part of Spring Hill. But and adding to something about some of the things that I think's coming in the next legislative session, I think you will see some more funding for DCS caseworkers. That's something that's been in the news about DCS and kids having to spend the night in the offices and not having sufficient caseworkers. So I think you will see some more funding for DCS caseworkers so they can more adequately handle all the foster children and issues with that in the state. And as well as other things in the news about TBI and needing more forensic scientists. I think you'll see more funding for that as well. And we are fortunate that we have the budget surplus last year that we were able to, like Jack mentioned, on one-time funding, and we will have that money rolling forward into the next legislative budget, as well as the excess or the surplus tax money. But you ask about Nashville and how they turned down about $200 million in economic impact to the state by denying the Republican National Convention to come to Nashville and for it to come to Tennessee. Not only was it coming to Nashville, but for the whole state. We would have been showcased across the country and the world. Just like if the Democratic National Convention wanted to come, we would all be supportive of that. So I think it was a poor decision on the Metro Nashville Council to make that decision not to bring the Republican National Convention here. Now, whether we punish them or we do anything, you know, that's going to be up to the General Assembly. Nashville is certainly a very important part of the state. They're an economic driver for the state, so we don't want to do anything to punish the state. But we certainly think, and I think all of us think that was a very bad decision on Metro Nashville's not to accept the Republican National Convention with that economic impact it would have for the state.
Anybody else want to? Okay, nope, all right. This one's for you, Representative Whitson. So you were a co-sponsor of Speaker Sexton's campaign ethics bill. This past session, it took effect in July. So will you please give us an overview of the legislation and detail some of the changes that you hope to see with this new legislation?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much. First of all, again, just like everybody else, I appreciate being here. I am going to miss Spring Hill. I'm your state rep in the Williamson County part for the next 48 days. But Spring Hill will always be a priority to me because what's good for Williamson County is good for Spring Hill and vice versa. And y'all add so much. On the campaign ethics and finance reform legislation, for years things have been rolling along, and we took a look at our laws and our requirements and regulations, and we decided we need to do some changes. You know, back in the 1970s, a lobbyist could give a credit card to a member and said, hey, just make sure at the end of the session you give me the card back. You can use it for anything without any responsibility. We've come a long way since then. And there's still some things we can do. It's hard to believe it. No, people ate well back then, didn't they? And so it was a comprehensive bill. In fact, it was we first introduced it back over 2 years ago, and then it didn't get past the first session of this General Assembly, and then we cranked it back up to this one. And it was a complex, comprehensive piece of legislation. It had over 30 sections that dealt with so many items that, and just quickly off the top of my head, I'll go through some of them. We found out, for instance, that commissioners of the state of Tennessee could receive payments, consulting fees. And in other words, we found out a commissioner was getting $8,000 a month from his former utility employee plus his state salary. We put an end to that. We found out that people could combine their campaign and their personal account and kind of muddle that money. We make sure that's separate now. We found out that people could pay their civil fines if they were found by the registry to violate campaign laws. They could pay that out of their funds or their PAC. we found out 501c4s, advocacy groups, they could raise all kind of money with no accountability, get involved in elections, and not have to disclose. They would act like a PAC and spend money like a PAC, but they were not required to disclose money. So we put a requirement in there 60 days for election. If they spend over $5,000 in a campaign, they're required to disclose those expenditures, not donations, expenditures. We also took a look, if you start a PAC, you have to provide, and the Senate came up with this idea, I thought it was great. You have to say who you are and prove who you are by providing a valid ID to create a PAC. And so as we went through this thing, we found out there was a lot of things we could do. In fact, trial judges were not required to file disclosure reports of their income. We also looked at how the boards, the registry and the Bureau of Ethics was filled slots. We gave more authority to the speaker and the lieutenant governor to fill those slots when vacancies come. And but there's still some other things we can do. We're going to look at this this next session, and I look forward to that. I would like to see us how we can disclose if a member or a member of the administration has, say, a consulting service or something on the side. Who's giving him income, and what position are they in that could be a conflict of interest? Also, we said we found out members who conduct campaign operations or expenditures and services have to disclose that, and members of the General Assembly and also their staff. So hopefully we have more transparency, more open government, so people, the citizens, can see how we operate, who is actually influencing elections, and how money is spent. There's a lot of money spent in campaigns. It is almost unbelievable how much money is spent in local races. It takes a lot to run a campaign, and but I just hope that this legislation is the start of something that we can build on to increase the confidence that people of Tennessee have in their state government.
Great, thank you. So this one is for you, Senator Hensley. Representative Cepicky, you're up next, and Representative Warner, you're next to you, so get ready. Your questions are coming. Senator Hensley, the Roe versus Wade decision banning abortion in Tennessee is already having a large impact on women and families across Tennessee. The ban in Tennessee is a little different from other states. Our ban does not have exceptions. Several groups are challenging that. Do you anticipate any changes on the current ban at this legislative session?
Well, that's certainly a very good question, and abortion is certainly in the news since the Supreme Court's decision on Roe versus Wade. We passed a bill 2 or 3 years ago banning abortion if Roe versus Wade was ever overturned. Honestly, when we passed that bill, I didn't think that would ever happen, but I'm certainly happy to see that it did happen, and our law does not allow for any exceptions. And you hear that rape and incest, that we need to have exceptions for that, but in reality, that's a very, very small percentage of the cases for abortions. Very, very small percentage. And if we only had those exceptions, I don't think any abortion clinics in Tennessee could even stay open if that's all the abortions they could do was for rape and incest. It's such a small percentage of cases. And there may be somebody brings that up in the legislature. I'm sure that there will be, that we need to have exceptions. But in my mind, the question in abortion is that unborn child a human being? Does it need to be protected by the government like we protect disabled people, elderly people, people that can't take care of themselves? In my mind, that unborn child is a human being, that it has a soul, and we need to protect it. The child themselves cannot, they have no decision about how they are conceived and whether it's rape, incest, or it's just someone that's using abortion as a method of contraception. The child, I think, needs to be protected. So I know that certainly those are rare cases, incest and rape, but they are cases that we need to deal with, and that will come up in the General Assembly, but I think they're so rare, and I think that unborn child needs to be protected. So in my mind, we don't need to have exceptions. We do have exceptions where if there's a medical issue that the woman's life is in danger, or for fetal demise, or for ectopic pregnancies, or all the reasons that come up during pregnancy when there are complications. We do have adequate protection, I think, for the medical providers, and you hear on the news and the media that there's not, but I think there is, and I think there's adequate protection for them. But abortion has always been such a divisive issue, and I was happy to be pro-life all my life. In my earlier years, even did deliveries for babies, and so I've been able to hold a newborn baby, and that's such an important thing, and that's a life that we as a government, I think, needs to protect. Other people have opinions and have different opinions, but that's why we're in the General Assembly, to do what we think's best for the state as a whole.
Thank you. So Representative Cepicky, this one is for you. You and Senator Hensley both sponsored a bill, and so you can chime in if you need to, Senator Hensley, for residential impact fees to help offset the cost of development in Murray County. So tell us a little bit about why you drafted legislation, and as a follow-up, can you let us know if it's going to come back this legislative session?
Briefly, thank you for allowing me to come here. It's an honor and privilege to represent you in the General Assembly. It's probably one of the greatest things and most frustrating things you ever do in your life. But it is a great honor to represent all the people in Murray County. I look forward to doing it. We are growing, if you didn't realize that, in Murray County at one of the highest rates in the state and one of the 14th fastest in the country. The growth has outpaced our infrastructure to the nth degree that now we're behind the eight ball. The city of Spring Hill and the city of Columbia have already approved over 20,000 homes to be built. If each one of those homes has one child, that's 20,000 new kids in our school system. Currently in Murray County, there's 14,000 in our school system right now with 23 schools. So you're talking billions of dollars required to meet the needs of our growing county and our growing cities. I think the first thing with the impact fee we need to do is we need to make sure that Spring Hill, Columbia, Mount Pleasant, and the new Murray County mayor and commission are all working together. I don't know if you can solve the problem, but I think you can come up with a plan to weather the growth and do it in a way that is beneficial to everybody. Yes, the impact fee bill that I ran, and Senator Hensley co-sponsored, is going to come back. I believe we're going to go at it a little bit differently this time. Currently, under the County Powers Act that was passed in 2006, a county can choose either an adequate facilities tax or an impact fee, one or the other. They can't have both. I went back and watched a video from 2006, and the dollar per square foot that the impact fee was put at, there was really no rhyme or reason to it. It's just the committee started throwing around numbers, and then somebody just came up with $1, and that's what they went with. The problem is that dollar has never been adjusted for cost of living or inflation in 16 years. Now, I don't need to tell you, if you've been around at the gasoline station for the last 16 years, $1 it doesn't buy what it used to buy. Just like in building, and I know we have Mr. Mayor here, $1 doesn't buy the lumber that it used to buy. And that lumber to build schools doesn't cost $1 anymore, it costs a lot more money. So one of the things we're going to ask the General Assembly to do is to adjust that dollar for cost of living and inflation over the last 16 years. And then either the comptroller probably will look at that every year and evaluate it. Now remember, cost of living could go down and inflation could go down. So it could go either way every year, but we've got to get that dollar up to what 2022 standards are for purchasing power. And if we can do that, that dollar will change to roughly, I think it's around $2.27. We're in a county like Murray that has 20,000 homes. You're looking at an additional 9 to 10 million that Murray County can use. Now here's the thing with an impact fee. You can't use it for just anything. You have to tell the state exactly why you're collecting that fee. So if it's going to go to new school construction, it is embargoed for just new school construction. In the cities, maybe it's a wastewater treatment facility that you want to collect for, or a water treatment facility. Back in 2006, the cities of Columbia and Spring Hill were already granted this ability to do impact fees. Williamson County has taken advantage of it. We need to have all these municipalities and the county government working together to do what's best for everybody in Murray County. And when you're looking at the potential of $2.5 to $3 billion worth of schools in the next 10 to 15 years, we have to come up with a logical solution. I think the solution is, it's great to come to Murray County. It's great to move here because of the people we have, but we're gonna need help from those new families coming in to help build the schools so that their children have a place to go to school in the future, so that we can have the educational system we want here in Murray County in the state of Tennessee.
Great, thank you. Can you tell us a little about another piece of legislation that you sponsored this session? It tried to create a 2-year pilot grant program for non-credit workforce instruction. Where does it stand now, and will that be making a comeback this session?
So being in education, Senator Hensley is my cohort in education in the Senate side. Here's the future of education, in my opinion. This is my opinion only. Is the generation we have right now is very impatient. They want to get their certificate, they want to get their diploma, they want to get their degree as quickly as possible so they can go out and start making money. We're going to have to take a look at higher education in the big 4-year institutions and see if they need to look and evaluate their model of education on how they're going to get people in and out quicker. Our community colleges are doing a fantastic job with this. Our TCAT centers are also doing a fantastic job with this, but there's a loophole, a small loophole, and it's those 8-week credentialed courses, those 10-week courses that you get an industry certification, such as if you've been out to Columbia State in Murray County, you've seen the telephone poles. Well, that's training people to climb the telephone poles. We have to have people that when the power goes out will climb the telephone poles and reestablish power. We have to have heavy equipment operators to run the bulldozers, to drive the dump trucks. We have to have CDL operators to deliver the goods to the stores so that when you go to Kroger or you go to Publix, there's something on the shelves for you to buy. It is going to be something in the future that we're going to have to address. And if you ask anybody in those industries, I have a construction man right next to you, he can probably tell you this, there's nobody applying for these jobs. Think about that. There's nobody to drive the bulldozers, there's nobody to drive the trucks, there's nobody to climb the telephone poles in the future here. We have to change that. So one of the things we're working on, I was working on with Senator Hensley, was to create a scholarship program that these kids can pull down from the state so that when they go to the line worker program, instead of having to pay for it out of their pocket, they can pull money down from the state that we have that would allow them to get a scholarship to go get to be a line worker program or drive a truck or drive a bulldozer or any industry certifications in mechatronics, CNC machine work, things like that. And folks, these are jobs that pay $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. Could you imagine being a high school senior, getting a scholarship to go to Columbia State at the line worker program to learn how to be a line worker, and in 10 weeks go to work for Columbia Power and Water or any other utility, making $60,000 or $70,000 a year as an 18-and-a-half-year-old with no student debt? Those are people that wind up as contributing members of our society. And as Senator Johnson talked about, sales tax revenue, right? They're shopping in your businesses. They're buying cars. They're buying homes, right? They don't wind up on welfare. They don't wind up on TennCare. They don't wind up on drugs, alcoholism, teen pregnancy. They don't wind up incarcerated in our prison system. So we're going to go after this again this year. Hopefully we can get funding for it as a pilot program for 4 years, get the data, and then come back to the General Assembly with some fantastic numbers and get it funded in the budget and move on from there.
Thank you very much. Representative Warner, you're up. You were the co-sponsor of House Bill 2656, Speaker Sexton's Truth in Sentencing Bill. This legislation will require violent offenders to serve 100% of their sentence. It went into effect in July. If this legislation had been in effect sooner, the man who killed Liza Fletcher in Memphis would not have been out of prison, and neither would the 19-year-old man accused of the deadly shooting spree that same week in Memphis. So are there other forms of legislation that you may sponsor this year that could keep violent offenders off the streets?
Yes, and let me start by thanking, as my colleagues did, thanking the Spring Hill Chamber. And it's going to be an honor to serve here. I'll be serving the Williamson County side of Spring Hill, and I really look forward to serving Spring Hill. I want to thank Speaker Sexton, Lieutenant Governor McNally for bringing this bill. This bill really hit home to me. I'll tell you a little story right here. And there's no doubt the young lady, the teacher in Memphis, would still be alive had this bill been in effect, a year or 2 years ago. But last year, I lost a nephew to a young man that had been given every chance in the world to turn his life around. His daddy is a General Sessions judge, Judge Rich, over in Bedford County. He had been in all kind of trouble as a teenager, had been given every chance. Prior to his parole release, he had served 2.5 or 3 years of a 6-year term for armed robbery. He gets out. He grew up with my nephew going to school there at Shelbyville Central High School. He gets out. I think within less than 4 months, he has shot my nephew 4 times, once in the back of the head, 4 times in the back. He leaves Nashville. He comes back to Shelbyville. He shoots my nephew's girlfriend in the face, point blank. For some ungodly reason, she lives and is doing fine today. She was able to call 911, then call my brother and tell him that who had shot him. Had she not been able to do that, they would have never found out. So, in telling you that, I'm grateful to have been a co-sponsor to this bill, and had this young man served his time or was still in prison, I'd have a nephew that's still here. It is something that I think that with the far left and the defund the police movement that started 2 or 3 years ago has created chaos all across our country, and you have seen crime rise everywhere. Memphis has become the number 2 town in the United States for crime. I think we passed some legislation, and you gentlemen help me here if I don't get it exactly right, but we passed a bill that said that Shelby County policemen could live outside of Shelby County because they couldn't get enough policemen that wanted to live inside of Memphis to serve as policemen. They had, if I'm not mistaken,
That's correct.
they had 300 cop cars empty because they couldn't get people to serve as policemen. So I think we should do more. I'm gonna be looking at some other legislation that may stiffen some penalties for some serious crimes. But I was a proud co-sponsor and glad we passed that piece of legislation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So this question is for anybody, whoever wants to take this one. With more residents moving to the suburbs of Nashville like Spring Hill, yet commuting into the city, which is in the works to help ease traffic conditions and streamline transportation to Davidson. What is in the works to help ease the traffic conditions and streamline any transportation? Representative Whitson, you gonna take
I knew
this
that
one?
transportation question was gonna come up
Okay.
in due time. First of all, again, Spring Hill has approached the transportation issue differently from many other cities under the leadership of Mayor Graham and Mayor Haggerty. Is that we found out that cities who participate and develop close relationships with TDOT are the successful cities in getting projects funded and put ahead of other cities. You have to invest something to put some skin in the game, as we say, as a local government, to show TDOT that you are committed to this. And Spring Hill has led the way. I've always kind of said it's like TDOT has an office down here in the mayor's office down here. And because we meet with them regularly down here with the city administrators and the leaders, and that developing a close relationship with TDOT is so critical to get projects started and moving forward. Before, I was going to talk a little bit about, I know a question's coming up about Spring Hill in particular on projects, but first of all, let me say, we have a new TDOT commissioner, Butch Ely, and Butch and his team, they have some real challenges ahead of them as we go forward, and what I'm hearing is there's going to be a big focus in the state on infrastructure. Right now in Tennessee, there's 200,000 what we call lane miles of roads available. And it's been that way for the past 10, 15 years. Despite the population going up, our lane miles stay the same. Interstates, for instance, make up just about 1%, a little over 1% of those total 200,000 miles, but it has 35% of the car traffic and 45% of the truck traffic. But we are still driving on. If you drive from Knoxville to Nashville, or Nashville to Memphis, or 65, you're still driving on the same 2-lane directional interstate, 2 lanes, that I drove on as a 16-year-old in 1970. Think of the population growth and difference that has been, and the impact that has on our rural economic development. So again, what's good for West Tennessee, Spring Hill with the manufacturing base and the products y'all provide, it can be impacted by the lack of transportation availability across the state. So what we're looking at is how are we going to fund this? It would take $20 billion to three-lane all the interstates in Tennessee, but we have to set a priority on that because, take for instance, and I'll give you an example, Exit 1 at Ardmore, 65 just south of here, about 50 miles, was built in 1958. It has not changed, that interchange. Think about, again, the population change and the amount of trucks and stuff that we have on our interstate. So we do have a challenge. Butch Ely is a great administrator and leader, and I see that him and his team will come up with ways to address this. We got to look at the electric vehicle. How are we, as we get more electric vehicles on the road, how are they going to pay their fair share? Do you put a fee on them of $100 a year like we did? But is that fair to the lady or older gentleman who drives 1,000 miles a year versus a guy that has an electric vehicle that pays the same $100 fee and drives 10,000 miles a year on the road? So there's a lot of challenges ahead as we move forward on this. And between here and Nashville, it is it's going to be something that we will look at. Now, as far as Spring Hill projects we go, we know that, again, the city took the lead. We have the new interchange under construction out at Buckner Road. They anticipate that should be open this time next year. That is amazing to me to build something that quick. Bear Creek Road on further down is part of the Improve Act. That construction is moving on and it should be finished next year also. 31 between Duplex Road and Tollgate and further up to Macatcher and Franklin. It's a 4-phase project. Some of it has already been fully funded, and they're doing the preliminary engineering and environmental studies, and then they'll have to get into the right-of-way. Also, for instance, the fully funded bridge replacement. This is the bridge on Duplex Road going over I-65. That is in the preliminary engineering phase right now, and we'll look. But again, I look forward, even though I do not represent Spring Hill as chairman of finance, or excuse me, as chairman of Transportation Subcommittee, I look forward to still working with the city leadership. And one more thing before I go up to Mike, I just want to thank Becca and the leadership she has shown here at the chamber over the years. It's just been a great pleasure working and meeting all you good folks here in Spring Hill.
Thanks. You do it, John. Okay, last question. This is for everybody. So we're going to talk about the new members that are going to be coming in. From my calculations, and you guys can correct me, it looks like we're maybe going to have about 18 new members in the General Assembly this session. Tell us a little bit about how you welcome in new members, and everybody can answer this one. If you, we'll just have everybody answer.
Well, real
and then
quick,
we'll wrap it up.
the University of Tennessee at the Baker Center puts on an orientation for new members in January. It's very important that they go to that and learn how the process works across the state.
I'll take this one, I guess, for a second here, as just finishing up my first term. Some advice I could give them, when you get down there, it's like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, you are absolutely, that's what it feels like. Take on very little. Learn maybe just a few bills your first go around, and learn how the process works. One thing good about our leadership, they were very helpful to me. Members like Sam, always giving you advice. But the best advice I could give would, don't take on too much. Pick you out 2 or 3 good bills and try to run with them.
Okay, Representative Cepicky.
One thing you have to consider, this will be my 3rd term coming up, God willing. Since 2018, when I was elected, in the House of Representatives, there's 99 members. There'll be 54 new members in the last 3 terms. Now, Mr. Whitson and Senator Hensley and Jack, who served time, these are very unique individuals with the wealth of knowledge that they have on government. 50-something members of the General Assembly on the House side, and I'm in my 3rd term, so I know where the bathroom is and I know how to get around. But Representative Warner and others coming in this year, you get that deer in the headlights look of how do I submit a bill? How do I present a bill? What's it like to go on the House floor? What's it like to talk to my constituents who are calling me saying, have you seen the roads around my house? It is drinking through a fire hose. And so the one thing I would tell them is find yourself somebody who's been there, who understands, that can show you how to navigate this, because as constituents, and there's one member that potentially we're missing right here is Kip Capley, who is in District 71. We're sitting in his district right now. As District 64, Highway 31 is the dividing line. So I'm going to be east of Highway 31. Kip Capley will be west of Highway 31. So you're sitting in his district right now. He's a freshman. He's going to be someone that we're going to have to help move along as quick as we can, because if you all know, like I do, in Murray and Williamson County, things are moving rather quickly when it comes to infrastructure and education, right? And we need all hands on deck as quick as we can. There's issues right now that are in the paper that Leader Johnson knows about that are going to be time consuming to us try to resolve these. So when you come up there as a new member, find somebody that's been there a while and start asking them questions, and then follow them around and learn how to get things done quickly.
And that reminded me, one thing, Representative Cepicky got elected. He came to the office. We talked about your first bill to allow military members to drive school buses and to encourage them. And he said, I'm going to learn how to do legislation based on this. Remember that? And we sat in the office, and you were very successful in your first piece of legislation.
Well, certainly, I'll just add to that. And the Senate doesn't have quite as many new members. We'll have probably 3 new members this time. And in the Senate, half of us run every 2 years. Jack had to run this year, and I didn't have to run because we're in different numbered districts. So half of the Senate doesn't even have to run this year. So out of the 33 senators, there'll be 3 new ones. But we certainly are always there to help them, to give them advice, and leadership is there to help them. And so we try to encourage them to get involved, and members generally get on committees that they have some kind of experience with, and they have committee members that will help them, and certainly leadership is there to help. And I personally try to help them all I can and give them advice, because there is a lot to learn, but hopefully they will get good assistance, and your assistant can make you or break you, so they'll hopefully get good assistance. But there is leadership, and there's other members there that are happy to help them anytime.
I just want to comment on the Donnie and Marie microphone. I think this is cool. I mean, it's like a microphone with bling. You know? I like that a lot. Now, I don't have much to add. It is interesting, and Representative Cepicky was giving you some good information. Somebody told me that the average length of service for someone in the Tennessee General Assembly runs something like 10.4 years. What that means is that there is a lot of turnover, maybe a little bit more in the House than there is in the Senate. Senator Hensley has seniority. He's a committee chairman. I have the honor of serving as the majority leader in the Senate, and I have no Democratic opposition in November. So if I get my wife to come up and vote for me, I should be back. Are you going to vote for me, Sam? Okay. All right. So I should have a handful of votes there. But it's an honor to get to represent you, and it is a great process. I brag a lot on our citizen legislature. That's what we are. We all have other jobs. This is not our career. As grateful as we are for the $22,000 a year y'all pay us to do this, we have other occupations. I personally have 2 kids in college, so we typically do something else. But it's an effective way to govern, because we're in session about 3 to 4 months out of the year, and then we go home. We go back to our jobs, our families. We go back and live under the laws we pass. Someone once said one of the biggest mistakes, one of the worst things that ever happened to our nation is when they put air conditioning in the United States Capitol, because they would stay year round. And I'll end with this. California has a full-time state legislature.
Oh, wow. Well, I just want to say thank you all very much. I very much enjoy being represented by this wonderful group of folks, and we're very grateful for all that you do for us. Everybody here. So if we could give them a round of applause.